One of the greatest proponents of the field of developmental psychology was Erikson. His theory of psychosocial development was the first of its kind to examine development throughout the lifespan, thus changing the dominant views on psychological growth. But in order to understand the theory, we must first examine the theorist. Erik Erikson was born in Frankfurt, Germany on June 15, 1902. Before he was born, Erikson's biological father abandoned his mother, a Jewish woman named Carla Abramson. His mother raised Erikson alone for the first 3 years of his life before marrying Erikson's pediatrician, Dr. Theodor Hamburger. His parents kept the details of his birth a secret, and until early adulthood, he lived as Erik Hamburger. As a boy, Erikson was a walking contradiction, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and Jewish. He was teased in temple school for his physical appearance, and then teased in grammar school for being Jewish. In looking at his early beginnings, it is easy to understand why identity came to play such a key role in Erikson's work, because it was one of his greatest struggles. When he became an American citizen, he changed his name to Erik Erikson. His son later speculated that this was a way of defining himself as a self-made man. He was Erik, son of Erik. Erikson's greatest influence was arguably his teacher and mentor, Sigmund Freud. Erikson's theory follows the development of Freud's ego throughout the lifespan. However, unlike Freud, Erikson's stages are psychosocial rather than psychosexual. As previously mentioned, Erikson's stages also begin in infancy and continue throughout the life, whereas the Freudian stages end at the onset of puberty.
Erikson focuses on the role that the culture and society had on the conflicts of the ego, while Freud looked at the conflicts between the id and superego. His stages are a lifespan model of development, going from birth to death in 8 stages, with each crisis building on the last one. Failure at one stage does not mean that you do not proceed to the next. Instead of stopping development at adolescence, he argued that we continue to grow and develop throughout our lives. He believed the pivotal stage in a person's life was identity versus role confusion. Stage 1. Trust versus mistrust. During the first few months of life, infants develop a sense of basic trust. The development of trust is dependent upon the consistency of the infant's main caregiver. Babies are helpless for the first part of their lives, and their only way of communication is through crying. If their care is predictable and reliable, then the infant will develop a sense of trust, which will transfer to other relationships. It will make the infant feel secure in later life events. The infant will view the world as a predictable place. After gaining a sense of trust, an infant will achieve the virtue of hope. On the other hand, if the care is unpredictable, then the infant will develop a sense of mistrust. This sense of mistrust will transfer to other relationships in the future. This may cause them to withdraw from others later in life. The infant will view the world as an unpredictable place. Stage 2. Autonomy versus shame and doubt. During ages 2 to 3, children are becoming more physically active. This stage looks at how much autonomy the child is given. Parents have a challenging job during this stage. They must let their child be independent, but not so much that the child is unsafe or experiences constant failure. Parents cannot do everything for their child. If their child is not successful at a task, they must not ridicule their child. This is particularly true during toilet training. The ultimate goal of this stage for the child is to be in control without losing self-esteem. Success at this stage will gain the child the virtue of will. Erikson said, quote, "This stage therefore becomes decisive for the ratio between loving goodwill and hateful self-insistence, between cooperation and willfulness, and between self-expression and compulsive self-restraint or meek compliance." End quote. When children are supported and encouraged during this stage, they become more independent and confident in their ability to survive in the world. Gaining independence fulfills the virtue of will in children. If children are not encouraged or do not have opportunities to be independent, they do not feel confident in their skills to survive. Helicopter parents do not help their child feel like an autonomous being. With the feeling of inadequacy, they may become overly dependent on their parents. They may also have lowered self-esteem and doubt their abilities. Without a sense of independence, children may exhibit ritualistic behaviors in adulthood. Stage 3. Initiative versus guilt. During the ages of 3 to 5, children are sometimes described as aggressive. Children's assertiveness is often mislabeled as aggression. As children grow older, they assert themselves more frequently. They make plans such as making up games and starting activities with friends. Along with making plans, children start to ask many questions as they grow more curious. When given the chance to plan, children develop a sense of initiative. This in turn makes them feel confident in themselves as a leader and decision maker. When parents expand their child's knowledge, the child feels like he or she is respected. Although too much guilt is not productive, a child needs to feel some guilt. An appropriate amount of guilt allows the child to have self-control and a conscience. The right amounts of initiative and guilt are important for success. With a healthy balance of both, children will obtain the virtue of purpose. If not given chances to make plans, they will develop a sense of guilt. This can be caused by either criticism or control from others. They start to feel like a burden to others and do not feel like an adequate leader. Consequently, they are often seen as followers. When parents brush off a child's questions or embarrass him or her, then the child feels guilty for being troublesome. Too much guilt may decrease socializations with others and creativity. Stage 4. Industry versus inferiority. Around the ages of 6 to 12, children are learning to read, write, do math, and make things on their own. Teachers and other peers play a very important role during this stage. A child's peers will be a major influence over his or her self-esteem. The child feels like he or she has to win approval by showing off his or her skills that are important. They also develop a sense of pride in what is accomplished. When children are encouraged for their efforts, they start to feel industrious and confident in their ability to fulfill goals. Some failures are necessary, though, in order to secure some sense of modesty. Like in the last stage, a balance between competency and modesty is essential. Success at this stage will lead to competency. When children are not encouraged for their plans and they feel restricted, then they begin to feel inferior. This causes them to doubt their efficacy, which may cause them not to reach their fullest potential. When children do not develop the necessary skills they feel insignificant in society, they develop a sense of inferiority.
Stage 5. Identity versus role confusion. This stage ranges from age 13 to 18, marking the transition from childhood to adulthood. The individual becomes more independent and begins to discover who he or she is. The individual will also begin to explore the roles to be occupied as an adult and re-examine his or her identity to gain a sense of self. Inability to gain this sense of self can lead to confusion about his or her role in society. During this stage, the body also goes through a series of changes to which the individual must become accustomed. The successful movement through this stage will give the individual the virtue of fidelity. Stage 6. Intimacy versus isolation. This stage takes place in young adulthood from approximately age 18 to age 40. In this stage, the individual explores committed relationships with persons outside of his or her family. Success in this stage can allow the individual to feel secure within a relationship. However, avoiding intimacy can lead to feelings of isolation and loneliness. This stage will instill the virtue of love. Stage 7. Generativity versus stagnation. This stage occurs in middle adulthood, ranging from age 40 to age 65. Individuals in this stage will become established in their careers and relationships. They begin families and become productive members of their community. Failure in this stage is marked by not achieving these goals, thus becoming unproductive. This stage will lead to the virtue of care. Stage 8. Ego integrity versus despair. This stage occurs after age 65. Life slows down as individuals reflect upon their previous accomplishments. They identify themselves as being successful, they develop integrity. However, this reflection will result in despair if a person deems his or herself as unaccomplished. Success in this stage will result in the virtue of wisdom. Erikson's theories were significant to psychology because they marked the first attempt at following development past adolescence. Unlike Sigmund Freud and Jean Piaget, Erikson presented ways in which individuals can develop well into adulthood. He was also highly focused on the development of an individual's identity, a subject that had great personal meaning. During his work, he coined the term identity crisis, which we still use today. His theories on identity have even seeped into the language of colleges and universities that present the college experience as a time for students to find themselves, as well as further their academics. Though Erikson's stages allow for some interpretation, they provide a strong framework for understanding how individuals develop throughout their lifetime.
Although his stages are revolutionary, there are some critiques. Many question Erikson's belief of identity formation in young adulthood. What if adults rediscover themselves and develop another way of viewing life because of their experiences? Is it possible that people's identity can change over their lifetime? His stages were also described as vague and hard to test. The stages provide a useful description of the development of personality, however, it does not give us a reason why this development occurs.